Hello everyone, and welcome to the Tome of Silver, the show where I randomly select a game from my collection, review it, and add it to an ever-growing ranking list. I still remember the first day I got my PlayStation 2. One of my family members told me there was a yard sale down the street, and thinking, what the heck, I took a stroll over to the house. A gentleman there had his PlayStation 2 up for sale for only $10. Obviously that was a steal, and I purchased it in a heartbeat. It didn't have a memory card, but it came with 2 controllers, 2 sports games, which admittedly I couldn't care less about, and a little game called Red Faction. At that point in my life, the extent of my knowledge of the Red Faction series was seeing a single promotional image for Red Faction Armageddon in an Xbox magazine, and I made the rash assumption that it was just another dime a dozen military shooter, so I never really gave the series any other consideration. After buying the PS2, I bought Samurai Warriors 2 very soon after, and basically sunk all my time into that, never really giving Red Faction a proper shake. However, when Red Faction was selected for this video, I was finally able to play it through for the first time. Was I missing out on anything? Grab your mining suit, arm yourself for the rebellion, and let's turn the page to Red Faction for the PlayStation 2. The year is 2075, and Earth's minerals have begun to run out. In an attempt to get more, the massive Altor Corporation goes to the one place they haven't been able to bleed dry, space, and begins a mining operation on the planet Mars. Altor puts out a call for prospective miners to work, promising a rewarding job and plenty of riches for those willing to accept. However, after many travel to Mars in hopes of success, it quickly becomes clear that Altor's promises were but wind and dirt, as the working conditions are far worse than anyone had imagined. The miners wake up to work almost the entire day, just to eat and fall asleep to work the next. The security officers are cruel and abusive to the miners, caring little for their human rights. To make matters worse, something simply known as the Plague has begun sweeping the mines, slowly killing the miners one by one, leading to them becoming paranoid if they will be the next to drop dead. Our protagonist, Parker, was just one such individual lured to the planet by Altor's lies. However, Parker begins to notice posters and whispers of a potential mutiny beginning to fill the barracks. One day, as Parker finishes up his shift and begins to return to his quarters, the die is cast, and miners initiate their plan, rising up and fighting back against the Altor captors. Parker manages to escape, where he is contacted by Eos, the leader of the resistance forces, requesting his help in their battle to escape Mars. Parker agrees, and begins his mission to take down Altor's defenses, and hopefully find a cure for the plague which affects his comrades. Red Faction's story is very straightforward and easy to follow. The goal of curing the plague and escaping Mars remains at the forefront for the entirety of the game's campaign. You won't have your mind blown by any incredible plot twists, nor enraptured by story beats dealing with the human condition when forced to endure oppressive conditions. There's not even much in the way of characters, with the occasional ally appearing on comms to tell you what to do next, or meeting the odd member of Altor like Griffin or this creature. The story keeps things simple, and I think it works to its benefit. The campaign is only about 6 hours long, give or take, and that's not enough time to give much depth to the characters and world without it feeling rushed or half-baked. And honestly, the premise of a revolution on Mars is pretty sweet, and I think the idea of facing an overwhelming threat while fighting for one's freedom is one that a player can very easily get behind, and use it to get themselves pumped up as they progress. The campaign acts more like a vehicle for the gameplay, really just being there to guide the player from set piece to set piece, and I think it's executed in a way that is enjoyable and works well. I think the only real issue comes from the protagonist, Parker. It feels like the developers couldn't decide on whether to have him be a speaking or silent protagonist. Parker narrates the opening and explains the situation on Mars. However, once we actually step into his mining shoes, he's entirely silent outside of the grunts of pain he makes when getting injured, with multiple people speaking to him through comms without Parker ever offering any words in return. But then there are like 5 or so cutscenes throughout the game where Parker just spontaneously starts talking again, which gave me whiplash after enough time had passed to make me forget he even had a voice in the first place. They really should have just committed one way or another with him. If they wanted him to be a silent protagonist, they should have kept him that way following the intro. If they wanted him to speak, having him just never respond whenever he's getting orders or being given help just makes Parker look weird. and they could have used moments of back and forth between Parker and his allies to fill up some of the game's quieter sections with some flavor text about the setting. As I said, the game isn't really about the world and characters, so in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal, but it was something I found continuously jarring as I played. As you can no doubt tell, you clever little Binks you, Red Faction is a first-person shooter, playing more into the same vein of the likes of GoldenEye or Perfect Dark, rather than your Halos or Call of Duties, placing a greater focus on movement and speed rather than making precise shots. Modern day shooters place great emphasis on headshots, with those being the quickest way to put an enemy down, a philosophy Red Faction does not subscribe to. In gameplay, firearms have an aim assist that will lock on to the closest adversary within a specific proximity to your reticle, making attacking enemies simple and snappy. Instead, its challenge comes from the veritable waves of enemies thrown the player's way, who can quickly outnumber you and shred your HP if you're careless. There's no cover system here either, so the best way to take as little damage as possible is to always be on the move, taking down your foe as quickly as you can before immediately snapping to the next one. This gave Red Faction an incredibly fast pace, making each firefight full of energy, which I found made the minute-to-minute shooting incredibly exciting. The game also wastes no time loading you up with an entire arsenal of weapons within its first hour. Pistols, assault rifles, rocket launchers, shotguns, you'll have an army's worth of options you can switch between at any time, letting you constantly switch up your weapon of choice and select the right tool for a given situation. My personal favorites were the assault rifle and submachine guns, as if you could get a bunch of enemies lined up directly in front of you, it became a cinch to mow them all down in seconds, and damn did it feel good.
Oh no! So the race war starts now!
The game's structure is very linear in design, with your goal usually being at a connecting straight line of rooms. But there were a few times where the area you were in had multiple doors and hallways leading to optional ammo and health, if not an outright dead end. Red Faction doesn't hold your hand either. It has no radar telling you where enemies are, or any arrows pointing to where you should be heading. These more open locations did a good job of making this facility feel more like a real place, with all the rooms people would need to have to operate and go about their day-to-day lives. That said, I did occasionally get lost in some spots for an embarrassingly long time. I was like a 5-year-old who lost their mom in IKEA, just constantly going up and down the same hallways, hoping to God I can find some way out of here. One of Red Faction's claim to fame was its destructible environments. By utilizing explosives like your rocket launcher or grenades, you can see them making an actual impact on some surfaces, destroying that part of the environment. For 2001, this is incredibly impressive, and if you have enough resources, you can use them to dig almost endlessly into the walls of Mars. In practice though, the system is pretty limited. You'll rarely need to use the destructible environments to progress, and most times they lead to nowhere anyway. There were a few neat instances where the system was used in clever ways, such as an early section where you encounter a locked door. One of your allies, Hendrik, can hack the door and open it, but this takes time, and you'll need to hold off against enemies while he works. However, if you've hung onto some explosives, you can destroy the rocks surrounding the door to create your own pathway, greatly speeding up the process. This was super cool, and I wish there were a bit more moments like this. But this was early technology, and by this point, it was more of a novelty than a revolution in gameplay. Brief side note, being a 2001 game, gravity wasn't a huge factor in destructible environments, leading to doors and vents floating in the air if you destroy everything surrounding it. This isn't a point against the game, just something I found funny. Though the campaign of Red Faction is fairly short, it's constantly shaking things up, which made those few hours tight and continuously engaging. While one moment you'll be fighting standard goons, it won't be long before you're blasting torpedoes in a submarine, fighting mutant rats, doing a bit of admittedly janky platforming, and even facing off against a few boss fights. Red Faction is always changing things up with new segments, but never allowing these sequences to stray too far away from the core gameplay. Nothing overstays its welcome and is divided across the campaign perfectly, making for an excellently paced campaign that ends just as you might be running out of steam. Well, there is one place it fails with these gameplay change-ups, and that's with its stealth segments. During the campaign, there'll be a handful of moments where Parker needs to disguise himself to walk through a secure area. Getting a little too close to an enemy will cause them to recognize you, and you'll be swarmed with armed guards without any real way to hide and put their awareness back to zero. Once you're spotted, the only way to not have to deal with bullets raining down on you the whole time is to restart from your last save. In these segments, the hallways are too narrow to walk around the patrolling guards, forcing you to wait a long while for them to pass before you can make a move. I felt these segments were at odds with the otherwise fast pace of everything else on offer, and they just weren't all that fun. I consistently failed to remain undetected in these segments, but thankfully being spotted is not an instant failure. You can still make a mad dash for your objective if you know where it is, which I'm happy to say prevented these segments from becoming painful. They just weren't great inclusions. One final note on the single player is that the game has no checkpoints. The player can manually save at any time, and dying will bring them back to their final save point. If you haven't saved in an hour and you die, get ready to do that hour all over again, so make sure you're saving frequently, especially if you made it past a particularly challenging section. Red Faction features a multiplayer mode, in which you can play split screen with a friend and activate bots for extra combatants. This ain't like your modern day multiplayer shooters, kiddos, with loadouts and perks, no. Instead, you're thrown into a map with just a pistol to your name, with all the best weapons scattered around the map, and it's up to you to reach them before your opponents do. A lot of these maps are really packed together, and sometimes you can just spawn right in the middle of two people's firefight. It's a mess, it's complete chaos, it's so much fun. It's far from being a balanced shooter, but sometimes a game just being balls off the walls insane is perfect, and I think that's exactly what Red Faction's multiplayer is. I genuinely feel like I could sink hours into the multiplayer, and constantly come back to pop in the game and play a few rounds whenever I get bored. And the best part about Red Faction is that I can do this whenever I want, without the need to have another person with me, or the fear of servers being permanently shut down. The multiplayer has the option to play just player versus bot, which means I can do the multiplayer, well, single player. Sure, the bots aren't the same as playing against a real person, of course not, but it's still a lot of fun, and it's a feature I very much appreciate. The passage of time is something that terrifies me to my core, and the idea of something I love potentially becoming inaccessible will always be something that upsets me. It's one of the main reasons why I'm so obsessed with having a physical collection. I even talked about a few multiplayer modes in previous videos like Aliens vs Predator and Transformers War for Cybertron that I just couldn't talk about because I no longer had a way to play them. Red Faction is over 20 years old, yet it's a cinch for me to just pop in the disc and experience that multiplayer for myself, and that's something that provides me a lot of comfort. Red Faction is a pretty damn good first-person shooter. A solid campaign, chaotic multiplayer, and impressive destructible environment technology all come together in a neat little bow. Did this game convince me to pick up the rest of the Red Faction series? I don't think so. Nothing about it was so exceptional that I just had to see what came next, but it was fun the whole way through. No peaks and valleys, just a steady, straight line of having a good time. And sometimes that's all a game really needs to be. Red Faction will secure a very respectable number 24 spot in our ranking. I think when it comes to shooters, I like War for Cybertron just a little bit more, likely due to my fondness of the characters and setting, so I don't think I can place Red Faction much higher. Still, it beat Octopath and Digimon, which is no mean feat. That's all for today's video. Next time, we'll be taking a look at one of Bandai Namco's more gritty titles, and trust me, there will be blood. Please look forward to that. In the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. Take care. May we see each other again when we turn to the next chapter in the Tome of Silver.